Subscribe to my channel. Before we dive in, I used to tell myself that small lies were harmless. They weren't really lies, just little omissions. Tiny threads try to hold together a life that was quietly unraveling. When Ethan started staying late at work and answering texts with one-word replies, I convinced myself it didn't matter. Marriage wasn't a fairy tale anyway. People grow quiet. People get tired. So when I told him I was out with friends or working late, I didn't feel guilty. At least, not fully. I just didn't mention which friends, or that one of them was a man who actually listened when Ethan didn't. His name was Daniel. He had this steady, understanding way of looking at me, as if he could see every ache I'd never spoken aloud. For weeks, I kept it innocent. Coffee, a drink after work, the kind of closeness you pretend isn't dangerous. I told myself I deserved the attention, that it was harmless comfort against the cold distance waiting at home. But lies, I learned, don't stay small. They stretch, they twist, until even the truth begins to feel dishonest. The night it all fell apart was supposed to be simple, a charity gala downtown. Ethan said he couldn't come because of a client dinner. Daniel invited me, and I agreed. I told Ethan I was meeting a co-worker for drinks. My voice didn't falter. That scared me most, how effortlessly deception had become routine. The ballroom shimmered with golden light, laughter bouncing off the glass walls. Daniel looked incredible in a black suit, the kind that makes you forget reason. He offered his arm, and for a moment I let myself feel seen, admired, chosen. Then, across the room, I froze. Ethan, near the bar, tie loosened, eyes scanning the crowd as though he already knew what he was looking for. When his gaze found mine, my stomach dropped. Time stopped. The music, the chatter, the clinking glasses. Everything disappeared except for that look. He didn't seem angry. He didn't shout. He didn't move toward me. He just looked. A look that said every question had already been answered. I whispered to Daniel that I needed air and slipped out onto the balcony. The night was cold, biting enough to sting. My phone buzzed. A message from Ethan. Enjoying the gala. Looks like your co-worker's suit fits well. My chest tightened. He'd known. Maybe he always had. Maybe he'd stopped asking, because he wanted me to hang myself with my own rope. He didn't come home that night. The next morning, his side of the bed remained untouched. A note lay on the kitchen counter. No need to explain. I saw everything I needed to. Don't come home tonight. I stared at the neat, calm handwriting, and for the first time, the weight of my choices crashed down on me. This wasn't just betrayal. It was cowardice. I hadn't physically cheated, but emotionally, I had crossed every line that mattered. 2 days of silence stretched between us like a canyon. I tried calling, texting, apologizing in words that felt too small for the damage done. Finally, on the third night, he agreed to meet, a quiet restaurant, the same one where we'd celebrated our first anniversary. I waited, clutching my napkin until it tore my hands. When he walked in, I barely recognized him. Not because he looked different, because he looked resolved. "Why?" he asked before even sitting. His voice was calm. Too calm. Why lie? I could have told him about the loneliness, the distance, the way I felt invisible in our own home. But those were excuses, not reasons. Because I wanted to feel seen, I whispered. Because I didn't know how else to tell him I felt forgotten. He nodded once, like he'd expected that answer. And did it help? No, I whispered. It only made everything worse. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he leaned back, exhaled slowly, and looked at me with something I couldn't read, a mix of exhaustion, sorrow, and pity. "I wasn't working that night," he said finally. "I was at the gala because I wanted to surprise you. I got the tickets weeks ago. I thought maybe it could bring us back together." His words hit harder than any accusation. The ground beneath me tilted. Every fragile justification I had built shattered under that truth. "I didn't mean for this to happen," I said, voice breaking. "Intent doesn't matter," he interrupted. "You hid where you were. You let someone else be your comfort instead of coming to me. That kind of damage can't be undone." He stood. "I'll stay at my brother's for a while. Maybe you should figure out what you truly want." I watched him leave. The clink of his wedding ring against a glass door echoed long after he was gone. That night, I sat in our dark bedroom, staring at the faint indentation where his pillow used to rest. The silence was unbearable, heavy with everything left unsaid. It's strange how clarity only comes after destruction. I had convinced myself for months that emotional neglect justified deception. But my betrayal wasn't about what Ethan did or didn't do. It was a choice I made, seeking attention instead of truth. A week later, I wrote him a letter. I didn't ask for forgiveness. I simply laid out the truth, stripped of excuses. I told him I missed the way he used to hold my hand at traffic lights, how his silence had hurt more than anger ever could. I told him I finally understood that love isn't constant warmth. It's choosing loyalty even when it feels cold. He never replied. Months have passed. Sometimes I see him walking downtown, that same quiet confidence. Our eyes meet briefly, politely, like strangers who share a secret. And every time, I feel that sharp ache again, the reminder that one night, one lie, one hidden truth cost me the only man who ever looked at me like I was his entire world. Maybe that's the cruelest part of betrayal. It doesn't explode. It echoes,